Warm welcome, audience. What's time there from where you're watching it? The screen fades from darkness to a golden horizon where the sun stretches its arms across an endless desert. The camera glides over rippling dunes and finds its way to a winding river, the Nile, glistening like liquid sapphire under the dawn. From the heavens, it looks like a snake of life coiling through the dust of eternity. Its breath turns barren sands into gardens. Its floods nourish the roots of civilization itself. Before there were kings, before there were pyramids, there was only this river and the people who followed its moods. They learned its rhythm, how it swelled with the tears of distant rains in Ethiopia, how it shrank into silence when the skies forgot to weep. Along its banks, small tribes built huts of reeds and clay, watching the water's reflection as if staring into the face of a god. They were farmers, hunters, fishers, children of the Nile's pulse. When the river rose, they sang songs of gratitude. When it felt low, they whispered prayers to unseen spirits. In time, they realized that the Nile was not merely water, it was time itself. Each flood marked the beginning of a new year, each harvest a victory against the desert's hunger. Generation after generation, these early settlers began to shape a bond with the land deeper than any seen before. They learned to tame the floods with canals and basins. They stored grain in mud-brick granaries. They domesticated animals, invented tools, and carved images into soft limestone, the first symbols of memory. In the stillness of night, beneath an ocean of stars, their elders spoke of gods that lived in the sky and in the soil. The sun became Ra, the great traveler who sailed across the heavens by day and vanished into the underworld by night. The earth was Geb, the sky Nut, and the air between them the breath of Shu. In this sacred triangle of earth, water, and sky, the Egyptians were born. As centuries drifted like silt, villages rose along both sides of the Nile. Clusters of families ruled by chieftains. These small kingdoms competed, traded, and occasionally clashed. Yet all shared one truth. The Nile was their mother, their god, and their destiny. The people of the south, the land we call Upper Egypt, built their homes close to the cliffs and hills. The people of the north, Lower Egypt, lived in wide deltas where the river met the sea. Between them stretched hundreds of miles of life, marked by fertile soil and sacred shrines. Sometimes the floods were cruel. Sometimes they brought death instead of life, sweeping away fields and homes. But from every disaster, the people learned. They built stronger walls, dug deeper channels, and prayed harder to the river gods. Out of these struggles, unity began to take root. The idea that the Nile's people were one. It was here that the concept of kingship was born. A man strong enough to command floods, wise enough to read the stars, and divine enough to speak for the gods, such a man could rule the whole land. The first chiefs began calling themselves lords of the two lands. They wore crowns of reeds and shells, symbols of both Upper and Lower Egypt. As power concentrated, art and religion blossomed together. The people sculpted idols of their gods, painted walls with ochre and black soot, and buried their dead with care, believing life continued beyond the tomb. Clay pots, beads, and tools found beside ancient graves whisper the same hope, that death was only another voyage down the Nile of eternity. In the southern city of Hierakonpolis, archaeologists today find evidence of grand feasts, ritual ceremonies, and the first attempts at monumental architecture. Here, the earliest kings built temples from mud brick, decorating them with scenes of victory and offerings to falcon-headed gods. Further north, in Abydos, sacred kings were buried beneath sand mounds, precursors to pyramids. Their tombs were not just graves, but portals, stairways leading the ruler's spirit to the stars. Each burial marked the rise of divine kingship, the idea that a pharaoh was more than human, a bridge between man and God. And yet, in these early days, Egypt was not yet one. Rival clans and kingdoms vied for control of the river's flow. Battles were fought along its shores, chariots were not yet known, and warriors carried stone-tipped spears. Still, the dream of unification lingered like a mirage over the desert. The people learned to write, from pictures scratched on pottery and bone. The first hieroglyphs emerged, drawings that spoke of cattle, harvest, and worship. Each symbol carried power. Words could now outlive the speaker. With writing, history began. Trade followed soon after. Boats of papyrus sailed the Nile carrying copper, gold, and incense. From the deserts came turquoise and lapis lazuli. From Nubia came ivory and slaves. The Nile was the road of nations. Every oar that dipped into its waters pulled Egypt closer to greatness. As the centuries rolled on, one leader after another rose, some just, some cruel, each adding a stone to the growing monument of civilization. The people learned the art of governance, collecting taxes, counting grain, measuring land, and building irrigation systems that would feed millions. Temples grew larger. Rituals grew more complex. Priests began to interpret omens and dreams. They charted the stars, predicting floods and planting seasons with astonishing precision. Their calendars carved into stone were among the first in the world. The idea of mat, balance, and order became sacred. Every act, from the turning of the plough to the coronation of a king, had to maintain harmony between gods, people, and nature. The Nile's rhythm was mat, and Egypt's survival depended on keeping it. Slowly, the image of a single ruler, divine and eternal, began to dominate thought. Artists carved falcon-crowned figures on pottery and walls. The double crown, white for Upper Egypt and red for Lower Egypt, symbolized the dream of unity. Legends say that a great ruler would soon arise, a man of vision who would bind the two lands together forever. He would be the first pharaoh, chosen by the gods, guided by the river, destined to leave behind monuments of stone that would defy death itself. As the chapter closes, the sun sets over the Nile, and the air glows with the fire of rebirth. The river's current whispers to the listener, this is where it all began. Here, in the cradle of the desert, humanity learned to build, to believe, and to endure. Egypt's heart has begun to beat. The Nile flows onward, carrying time, memory, and the promise of eternity. The morning sun rises over the wide plains of the Nile. Mist drifts low over the water, catching the gold of dawn. Birds stir in the reeds. Fishermen untie their boats, and the smell of wet earth fills the air. The villages that line the riverbanks hum. With quiet energy, people planting, grinding grain, weaving baskets, living by the steady rhythm of the Nile. But beneath this peaceful life, something greater is beginning. The scattered tribes and small chiefdoms that once lived apart are growing into small kingdoms. Each is ruled by a chieftain, proud, ambitious, and certain that the gods have chosen him. They build temples to their patron deities, train warriors, and carve symbols of power into stone. Egypt is awakening, not just as a land, but as a dream of unity. The land is split into Upper Egypt to the south, where cliffs rise over narrow strips of green, and Lower Egypt to the north, a vast delta spreading toward the sea. Each wears its own crown, white for the south, red for the north. Between them, the Nile winds like a thread of fate, binding them together even as it divides them. For generations, the two kingdoms have traded and fought, loved and envied one another. But now, the time of rivalry nears its end. From the southern city of Hierakonpolis, a new ruler rises, Narmer, son of warriors, chosen of the falcon god Horus. He dreams of one Egypt, united under one crown, one flag, one god. Narmer's army marches north under banners painted with falcons and bulls. The desert shakes beneath their steps. Drums echo, arrows flash, shields clash. At the delta marshes, the defenders of the north stand firm, their boats spread across the reeds. The battle is fierce and endless, sun blazing down on bronze and blood. But Narmer's will is stronger than the river itself. By sunset, the red crown of Lower Egypt rests in his hands. The dream is fulfilled. Narmer wears both crowns, white and red, upon his head. The two lands are one. Egypt, for the first time in history, breathes as a single nation. To honor the union, Narmer builds his capital at Memphis, where the lands of north and south meet. There, at the heart of the Nile, he founds a new world, a world ruled by divine kingship. He is no longer only a man. He is Pharaoh, the living Horus, the bridge between gods and mortals. Every decree he speaks becomes sacred law. Every gesture shapes destiny. Artisans carve his image into ivory and stone. His famous palette of Narmer tells the story, the king striking down his foes beneath the watchful eye of Horus. In those carvings, we see more than a victory, we see the birth of Egyptian identity. From now on, every pharaoh will follow this image, warrior, priest, and god. Life across Egypt begins to transform. Scribes, the new guardians of memory, record harvests and taxes on papyrus. The first hieroglyphs spread across temple walls, pictures of birds, eyes, rivers, and crowns. Carrying stories of power and prayer, temples rise along the Nile's banks, their courtyards filled with incense and chants. Priests speak of Mat, the sacred balance of truth, order, and justice that the pharaoh must protect at all costs. Farmers till the fields according to new calendars made by the priests. They learn when to sow and harvest by watching the stars. Each year, when the Nile floods, the people celebrate, believing their king's divine favor brings the waters. The river becomes a mirror of heaven, and the pharaoh its reflection. Trade flourishes like never before. Caravans cross the desert carrying gold, lapis lazuli, and copper. Boats glide along the river laden with grain, papyrus, and perfume. Egypt's wealth begins to shine far beyond its borders, drawing envy and admiration from distant lands. And with prosperity comes art. Craftsmen sculpt tiny amulets shaped like falcons and scarabs. Painters cover the walls of temples with bright colors, reds, blues, and ochres, scenes of offerings, prayers, and victory. The gods, once distant, now seem to walk among the people in the form of stone. In the deserts beyond the river, great tombs rise, the mastobas of the early kings. They are simple yet mighty, built from mud brick and lined with treasures for the afterlife. Each pharaoh believes that death is not an end, but a crossing, a journey through the stars to join the gods. At night, the city of Memphis glows with firelight. Priests sing hymns to Ra, the sun god, asking that he bless the coming dawn. Scribes sit under oil lamps, copying royal decrees onto scrolls of papyrus. Children sleep beneath the hum of distant drums. The land feels eternal, as though time itself has found a home in Egypt. Narmer grows old, but his name echoes through every field and temple. He has turned chaos into unity, tribes into one kingdom, and men into a civilization. When he dies, he is buried in a tomb filled with gold, ivory, and the prayers of his people. His soul, they believe, sails on the solar bark with Ra, watching over the two lands forever. The throne passes to his successors who carry his vision forward. Each king adds something new, stronger laws, grander temples, wiser scribes. Together, they build the foundation of what the world will later call the Old Kingdom, the Age of Pyramids. The Nile flows quietly beneath the stars once more. Its waters glisten like the eyes of the gods. In their reflection lies the promise of eternity, a nation destined to outlast time itself. The Nile glides like polished glass beneath the blazing sun. On its banks, a new Egypt rises, proud, united, and filled with the sound of chisels, hammers, and prayers. The dream that Narmer began now blooms into an age of marvels. The world calls it the Old Kingdom, and later generations will remember it as the Age of the Pyramids. Pharaohs now rule not merely as kings, but as gods incarnate. Their word shapes the land, their breath blesses the harvest, their image adorns every wall. They claim descent from Ra, the sun god, whose daily journey across the sky mirrors their own eternal reign. To serve the pharaoh is to serve the divine order of the universe. Mat. In this golden time, art, architecture, and faith intertwine. The capital, Memphis, grows into a city of dazzling light. Streets bustle with scribes, craftsmen, and priests in linen robes. Granaries overflow with grain. Ships crowd the harbors, and banners flutter from palaces carved in bright stone. Everywhere, the symbol of the double crown glows, white and red, unity eternal. Yet, above all, one vision defines this era, the desire to build monuments that will outlast death itself. Pharaoh Djoser, guided by his genius architect Imhotep, orders a tomb unlike any before it. At Saqqara, stone blocks rise tier upon tier, climbing toward heaven. The step pyramid is born, the first great monument of stone, the first whisper of eternity made solid. When sunlight strikes its steps, it gleams like a stairway to the gods. The people watch in awe. They see not a tomb, but a promise that their king will live forever and that they, through him, will share in immortality. From that moment, every pharaoh seeks to surpass the last, building higher, grander, closer to the sun. Generations pass and Egypt's wealth flows like the Nile itself. Pharaohs send expeditions to Sinai for copper and turquoise, to Nubia for gold and ivory, and across deserts for fine stone. Temples rise beside every city, colossal statues stare over the horizon. The land hums with the rhythm of order, priests at prayer, scribes at their scrolls, farmers at the plough. Then comes the age of the great builders, Snefru, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. Each dreams of perfection carved in stone. At Giza, their visions take form, vast pyramids piercing the sky, aligned with the stars of Orion, the resting place of Osiris himself. Tens of thousands of laborers, not slaves but loyal workers of the crown, toil season after season, pulling limestone blocks with ropes and song. They live in well-planned villages, fed and cared for, knowing they build not just for their pharaoh but for eternity. Under Khufu's reign, the Great Pyramid rises, a mountain of stone so vast that even the desert bows to it. It is said to contain nearly 2.5 million blocks, each one placed with impossible precision. Inside its hidden chambers, the spirit of the king will ascend to the heavens, joining the gods among the stars. Even today, its shadow moves like a sundial marking the ages of humankind. At its base, the great Sphinx guards the necropolis, a lion's body with a pharaoh's face, watching the desert with unblinking eyes. Some say it is Khafre's image, others believe it represents the eternal guardian of Egypt's soul. Sand drifts around its pores, but its gaze never fades. Life flourishes under the shadow of these monuments. Scribes develop mathematics to measure fields, and stars, artists perfect the balance of form and line, and architects learn to tame stone itself. The economy thrives, the Nile floods with predictable grace, blessing every farmer's hand. Music, poetry, and festivals fill the air. Hymns to Ra at dawn, dances to Hathor at dusk. Yet even in golden ages, shadows grow. The power of priests increases. Nobles demand more land. Common people whisper that the pharaohs build too much for death and too little for life. Slowly, the strain of grandeur weighs on the kingdom's heart. The cost of eternal monuments begins to erode mortal stability. In time, famine touches the land, the floods come late, the harvests shrink. The people pray to the gods, but the gods are silent. The treasury empties, the nobles grow bold, and the voice of the pharaoh, once thunder, begins to fade into echo. Still, Egypt endures. The pyramids stand as proof of what faith, order, and vision can create. They are the soul of the old kingdom, the embodiment of a belief that death is merely another sunrise. As the desert winds whisper through Giza, the stones seem to speak. They tell of a people who reached for heaven with bare hands and touched it. They tell of a time when man and God were one. The sun sets behind the pyramids, and their shadows stretch across the sand like fingers of eternity. The age of perfection has dawned, and soon its long twilight will come. The sun that once shone bright over the pyramids begins to dim. The Nile still flows, but Egypt's heart grows restless. The mighty pharaohs of the old kingdom, those god-kings of stone and sunlight, have fallen silent. Now the wind carries not the songs of builders, but the cries of the hungry. The old order trembles. Floods that once blessed the land now falter, the harvests fail, and the fields crack beneath the sun. Without abundance, loyalty turns to rebellion. The local governors, called nomarchs, no longer bow to the throne. Each claims to rule in the name of the gods, yet their swords point not to heaven but toward one another. Thus begins the first intermediate period, an age of confusion and division. The crown at Memphis loses its luster, its commands ignored beyond the walls of the city. In the south, the people of Thebes rise with defiance and faith in their own destiny. To Egypt's again, one in the north, one in the south, as it had been in the beginning. For more than a century, chaos reigns. Temples crumble, trade halts, and tombs lie empty of offerings. The priests lament that the sacred balance has been lost. In the streets, the poor cry that the rich have stolen heaven itself. The poets write laments of sorrow. The river is blood, and men shrink from drinking it. The nobles are in mourning, and the land is left to its misery. Yet amid the ruin, hope is born anew. From Thebes rises a strong and wise ruler, Mentuhotep II. He is no mere conqueror. He is a restorer. He gathers the divided lands under one banner once more and rekindles the flame of unity. His armies march north, his emissaries bring peace, and his builders once again raise temples to the gods. When his throne is secure, Mentuhotep declares a new dawn, the Middle Kingdom. It is not as grand as the Old Kingdom, but wiser, steadier, more human. The pharaohs now see themselves not as gods above men, but as shepherds of their people. Justice and balance, rather than glory and conquest, become the pulse of Egypt. In the capital of Ichtoi, near the fertile lands of the Fayum, administration flourishes, scribes fill their scrolls with decrees, farmers record their yields, and artists rediscover the grace of form and life. Temples rise once again beside the Nile, dedicated to Ammon, who begins his ascent as king of gods. The priests of Thebes grow powerful, weaving religion and politics into one sacred thread. Trade revives across the borders. Caravans journey through the desert to Byblos, bringing cedar wood for ships. Boats sail south into Nubia, laden with gold, ivory, and incense. The Egyptians learn diplomacy, the art of peace through gifts and words rather than war. Their scribes carve tales of wisdom, the story of sinew, the tale of the shipwrecked sailor, and hymns of gratitude to the Nile. Life becomes more than survival. It becomes reflection. Tomb inscriptions speak not only of power but of kindness and virtue. Officials write that they fed the hungry, clothed the naked, and judged with fairness. The idea of morality takes root deep in Egypt's soul. The Middle Kingdom is also an age of innovation. Engineers strengthen irrigation canals, expanding farmlands and taming the floods. Art returns to simplicity, serene faces, gentle curves, a reflection of calm hearts. The royal tombs at Beni Hazen are carved into cliffs, showing scenes of daily life farmers. Hunters, musicians, ordinary people immortalized in stone. Yet beneath this harmony, new threats stir. Egypt's borders stretch far, and with every expansion comes unrest. Nubians in the south challenge Egypt's rule, while tribes from the deserts to the east eye its wealth. To guard its frontiers, Egypt builds fortresses along the Nile and strengthens its army. For a time, peace holds, a balance delicate as the wings of a heron over still water. But fate, as always, changes course after centuries of quiet prosperity. Weak kings ascend the throne. Their grip loosens, governors again seek power for themselves. The unity that Mentuhotep built begins to fade like paint in the desert sun. Then, from beyond the eastern frontier, new faces appear, strangers with strange weapons, horses, and chariots. They come from Asia, traders at first, settlers next, and finally conquerors. They are the Hyksos, and their coming will shatter Egypt's peace. As twilight falls on the Middle Kingdom, the pyramids stand silent once more. The temples whisper to the gods, begging them to remember the covenant of Mat. The Nile flows on, patient and eternal, carrying both memory and warning. Egypt, reborn once, must now face its greatest trial, a foreign rule that will test its very soul. The winds shift again across the deserts of the east. Egypt, once a land of calm rhythm and divine order, begins to tremble beneath the march of strangers. They come not as guests, but as conquerors, riding chariots that thunder like storms, their bronze weapons gleaming in the sun. They call themselves the Hyksos, rulers of foreign lands. To the Egyptians, they are shadows from beyond the horizon, bringing a dawn they never wished for. The Hyksos arrive through the delta, the green marshlands of the north. At first, they trade and settle, offering foreign goods, fine horses, strange bows, and glittering metal unseen before. But slowly the balance shifts. Their chieftains gain power, their numbers grow, and the weakened kings of Egypt can no longer hold them back. The Hyksos seize avarice, making it their stronghold, and soon all of Lower Egypt bows beneath their rule. For the first time in centuries, Egypt is ruled by outsiders. The double crown is broken again. The south remains in Egyptian hands, ruled from Thebes, while the north wears the yoke of the Hyksos kings. Yet even in their dominance, the foreigners bring change. They introduce the horse-drawn chariot, the composite bow, and new forms of metalworking. Egypt learns from its conquerors, studying their weapons, their tactics, their resilience. In Thebes, the true Egyptians wait and watch. The royal family of Thebes, proud descendants of the Middle Kingdom, burns with silent fury. They pay tribute to the Hyksos kings but dream of liberation. One such ruler, Seq-Enenri Tau, dares to resist. His defiance is met with violence. His skull, found centuries later, still bears the marks of Hyksos' blades, but his death lights a spark that will become a roaring fire. His son, Chamos, takes up his father's mantle. He gathers the soldiers of Thebes, rouses the priests of Ammon, and swears an oath to drive the foreigners from the land. The Nile becomes a highway of war. Chariots crash across its banks, arrows fly through the smoke, and villages echo with cries for freedom. Chamos wins victories but dies before the final blow is struck. His younger brother, Ormozai, inherits not just the crown, but the dream of reclaiming Egypt. Ormuz is young but fierce, a warrior born beneath omens of victory. He unites the southern armies, trains them in Hyksos' methods, and marches north with the fury of Ra himself. The siege of Avaris lasts long and brutal, months of hunger, fire, and flood. But Ormuz will not yield. When the walls finally fall, Egypt roars with triumph. The foreigners are expelled, their chariots broken, their cities turned to dust. The Nile runs free again, and so does Egypt. Ormuz becomes the founder of a new era, the New Kingdom, a time of glory, wealth, and empire. He rebuilds temples, reopens mines, and fills the treasury with gold from Nubia. To the people, he is not only a king but a savior, the restorer of Maat, the divine balance. With victory comes ambition. The pharaohs no longer wish merely to defend their borders, they seek to expand them. From the deserts of Libya to the rivers of Mesopotamia, they set their gaze on conquest. Egypt, once inward and serene, now turns outward, a lion among nations. The priests of Thebes declare Amun-Ra supreme above all gods. Temples rise to him across the land. Vast sanctuaries of power and light, the pharaohs, now seen as his chosen sons, march to war beneath banners of gold. In their hearts burns the memory of foreign chains, a wound that drives them to ensure Egypt shall never bow again. The new kingdom dawns like a sunrise over the Nile. Art flourishes, walls are painted with scenes of victory and peace. Tombs are carved deeper into the Valley of the Kings. The pyramids are no longer raised, for the kings now rest in secret chambers, hidden from robbers and time. But their legacy, written in hieroglyphs, shines brighter than the sun. Trade flows once more. Gold from Nubia, incense from Punt, cedar from Lebanon. Ships glide along the river, their sails catching the same wind that once carried invaders, now it carries prosperity. Egypt stands taller than ever before, its borders vast, its people proud. And among the new generation of rulers, some will achieve greatness beyond imagining. Warrior queens, godlike kings, and dreamers of empire will rise. Names that the world will never forget. Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, Akhenaten, and Tutankhamun are yet to come. But for now, Egypt rests victorious, united, reborn from the ashes of conquest. The sound of hammer and chisel returns to the valleys, shaping temples not for survival, but for eternity. The gods smile once more upon the two lands. The Nile, in its eternal rhythm, whispers of a promise kept. Egypt may fall, but it shall always rise again. The dawn over Thebes blazes gold, spilling across the river like molten sunlight. Egypt stands unshaken, its heart beating with victory and pride. The foreign kings are gone, the land is whole again. Under the rule of Ormoz's heirs, a new age begins, a time when Egypt will not merely survive but conquer. The new kingdom grows like the floodwaters of the Nile, wide, unstoppable, life-giving. Pharaohs now dream beyond their borders. Their eyes turn south to Nubia's gold, north to Canaan's trade, east to the lands of the Tigris and Euphrates. Egypt, once content within its sacred valley, now becomes an empire. In the halls of Karnak, priests of Amun-Ra chant hymns that echo like thunder. The god of Thebes has become the god of all Egypt, the creator, the protector, the light of the world. Pharaohs kneel before his statue, gilded and towering, and rise as his chosen sons. Their victories are declared divine, their crowns kissed by the sun. One such divine ruler is Thutmose I, a warrior king whose armies march farther than any before him. His chariots thunder through Nubia, crossing cataracts where no Egyptian flag had flown. He leaves behind fortresses and temples as marks of his might, binding distant lands in Egypt's name. The gold of Kush and the treasures of the south fill his treasury, while foreign princes send gifts to win his favor. When he dies, his daughter, Hatshepsut, takes the throne, a woman in a world of kings, but greater than them all. She wears the false beard of the pharaohs, the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, and rules with wisdom and vision. Under her, Egypt turns from war to peace, from conquest to creation. She rebuilds the temples of Ammon, strengthens trade, and sends grand expeditions to Punt, the land of the gods. The ships return from that distant land heavy with incense, ebony, gold, and strange trees that perfume the air. Hatshepsut immortalizes a triumph on the walls of her temple at Deir el-Bahari, a masterpiece carved into cliffs, rising like a stairway to heaven. The reliefs show her divine birth, her voyages, and her eternal bond with Ammon. She becomes known not for her battles, but for her beauty of vision, a queen whose peace became her power. But history never rests in stillness. After her reign, the world again hears the sound of marching feet. Her successor, Thutmose III, the Napoleon of Egypt, transforms the kingdom into an empire of steel and glory. He rides in a chariot of gold, his bow unerring, his mind sharp as the desert wind. From Syria to Nubia, from the mountains to the sea, his banners fly. His greatest victory comes at Megiddo, where he defeats a coalition of rebellious princes. The battle lasts a day, but its legend lasts eternity. He captures the city by cutting off its supply lines, surrounding it like a falcon trapping prey. The spoils of war pour into Thebes, chariots, horses, gold, and captives. Egypt's wealth reaches its height. The temples overflow with offerings to Amun-Ra. Now Thebes becomes the shining heart of the world. Its streets glitter with lapis and turquoise. Its palaces echo with music. The walls of temples stretch skyward, carved with hymns of praise. At Luxor and Karnak, colossal statues rise, faces calm, eyes eternal. The stone skin of gods among men. Artists perfect the human form, carving muscles that seem to breathe, painting faces alive with divinity. The Nile mirrors this greatness, its flood steady, its waters gleaming beneath ships of cedar and gold. In every village, the people sing of their pharaoh's glory, believing that the land itself thrives on his breath. The word Egypt becomes synonymous with power, wisdom, and the eternal sun. But even as Egypt reaches its zenith, the seeds of change are sown quietly. Wealth breeds pride, and pride invites gods to test man's humility. Within the temples, priests of Ammon grow vast in power, rivaling the pharaoh himself. Their coffers swell, their prayers turn political. The divine balance mat begins again to tilt. Yet for now, Egypt stands unbeaten. From the cataracts of Nubia to the gates of Asia, its name commands awe. Foreign kings send tribute, envoys kneel in golden halls, and the world bows to the children of the Nile. As the sun sets behind the cliffs of Thebes, the temples glow red, their hieroglyphs alive with firelight. Priests chant, drums echo across the water, and the pharaoh lifts his hands to the heavens. Ra has given me life eternal, he proclaims. And so it seems, for in this moment, Egypt shines brighter than any civilization before or after. The empire has risen to its mightiest form, but the heavens are watching, and soon the gods will test the pride of kings once more. The temples of Thebes stand heavy with incense, their columns painted in gold and shadow. For centuries, the priests of Amun-Ra have whispered the language of eternity, their power woven into the heart of the kingdom. But now, in the golden palace of the pharaoh, a new idea begins to flicker, dangerous, divine, and destined to reshape Egypt forever. The young prince Amenhotep IV, son of Amenhotep III, inherits a world drowning in wealth and faith. His father's reign was one of peace and splendor. Temples rose like forests of stone. Festivals filled the year, and Egypt shone like the eye of Ra. But the priests had grown powerful, almost rivaling the pharaoh himself. Their temples controlled vast lands. Their influence reached every corner of the two lands. Even the gods seemed to serve their will. Amenhotep IV watches this and feels a restlessness in his soul. He dreams not of Ammon, the hidden god of Thebes, but of another, a god older, purer, radiant, and visible to all. He calls this god Aten, the sun disk, the living light. Not a hidden power in shadow temples, but the open brilliance that shines upon every being, king and farmer alike. When Amenhotep becomes pharaoh, the change begins slowly. He still honors Ammon, still visits the temples, still bows in ritual. But deep within, he feels the pull of a new faith. He composes hymns to Aten, songs of light and warmth, of the sun's love for all creation. He calls Aten the giver of breath, the one god beside whom there is no other. In his words, the old gods begin to fade. Then, with a courage bordering on madness, he takes a step no ruler before him dared. He renames himself Akhenaten, meaning he who serves Aten. He closes the temples of Ammon, dissolves the priesthoods and erases their names from walls and monuments. He orders a new capital built in the desert, Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten, known today as Amarna. There, far from the old gods, he will build a city for the living sun. Stonecutters, artists, and priests of Aten flock to the new capital. Temples open to the sky, with no roofs to block the sunlight. Every offering, every prayer is made beneath the open heavens. Art itself changes, no longer the rigid perfection of the past, but warm, living scenes of the royal family under Aten's rays. The sun's hands reach down in carved reliefs, each beam ending in a tiny palm offering the sign of life, the Ankh. Akhenaten stands before his people not as a distant god-king, but as a human touched by divine light. Beside him stands his queen, Nefertiti, radiant as the dawn. Together they are the chosen of Aten, their children the blessings of light. Their statues show affection, laughter, even tenderness, emotions once absent from royal art. It is as if humanity itself has awakened from stone. But outside Amarna, darkness grows. The priests of Ammon seethe in silence, their temples abandoned, their wealth stripped. Common people, confused and afraid, whisper prayers to old gods in secret. The empire weakens as attention turns from borders to belief. Vassal states in Syria and Canaan cry for aid, but Egypt's messengers bring no armies, only hymns to the sun. Akhenaten's world becomes an island of faith surrounded by discontent. He rules by devotion, not force, convinced that truth shines brighter than war. But even light casts shadows. As famine and rebellion spread, whispers rise that Aten does not protect the people as Ammon once did. The pharaoh, consumed by his vision, withdraws further into his sacred city, blinded by his own light. When Akhenaten dies, the empire is trembling. The nobles and generals move swiftly to restore order. The temples of Aten fall silent, the city of Amarna fades into dust, and the name of Ammon returns in triumph. The young boy king Tutankhaten, raised in the new faith, is renamed Tutankhamun, living image of Ammon. The old gods reclaim their thrones. Akhenaten's legacy is buried, his statue smashed, his name erased, his city abandoned to the desert winds. The scribes call him the heretic pharaoh, a blasphemer who turned from the gods. Yet across the centuries, his voice still echoes. He dared to dream of one God for all, to speak of love and light in an age of power and fear. Today, under the dust of Amarna, his broken temples still shimmer faintly when the sun rises. Perhaps Satan never left, only waits, shining quietly, as he always has, on all creation without judgment. The winds of Amarna fall silent. The golden city of the sun, once filled with songs to Aten, now lies half empty, its walls cracked, its altars cold. Across Egypt, the people turn their eyes once more to Thebes, where the old gods whisper in the dark, and in the midst of this trembling kingdom, a child ascends the throne. He is barely 9 years old, Tutankhaten, son of Akhenaten and a princess of royal blood. He has known only the bright faith of Aten, the god of the open sky, but around him the courtiers and generals murmur of chaos, of temples abandoned, of cities in ruin, of gods forgotten. They kneel before the boy and speak softly, "Restore what was lost and Egypt will live again." And so, under the guidance of powerful advisors, the elder statesman and Horemheb the general, the young king begins the great reversal. He changes his name from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun, living image of Ammon. It is more than a name. It is a declaration the gods of Egypt are reborn. The temples reopen. Their priests return to chant beneath columns of dusted gold. The idols of Ammon, Osiris, Isis, and Hathor are carried out in grand procession veiled in incense. The people weep with joy. Their gods, long hidden, have come home. Across the land, artisans repair shrines, farmers offer the first fruits, and scribes carve the words of gratitude. Maat is restored. The two lands are whole again. In Thebes, the temple of Ammon at Karnak once more becomes the heart of worship. The boy king, barely more than a child, is carried in golden palanquins during festivals. He bows before the great god, his voice soft yet filled with reverence. He may not rule with power, but he rules with hope, a symbol that Egypt has healed from her wounds. Under his reign, peace returns to the land. Fields bloom again, trade resumes, and art blossoms in tombs and temples. Artists depict scenes of joy, the king hunting gazelle, sailing on the Nile, or offering flowers to the gods. The style of Amarna's realism lingers, faces still soft, gestures still human. But now the divine and mortal live together again in harmony. Tutankhamun's court, though young, glows with life. He is married to his half-sister, Ankhesenomon, daughter of Nefertiti. Together, they walk the palace gardens at dusk, their laughter echoing beneath the date palms. She is his companion, his comfort, and his link to the past age of light and loss. But beyond the palace, Egypt's enemies stir. The lands once conquered by Thutmose and Ramses are slipping away. Horemheb, the general, urges war. Yet the boy king's health is fragile, his frame thin, his steps slow. He dreams not of conquest but of restoration. His command is not to expand Egypt, but to renew her spirit. The years pass quietly. Tutankhamun grows into youth, kind and curious, devoted to his gods and people. Yet fate is cruel to the gentle. Around his 18th year, he falls ill, perhaps from a wound, perhaps from weakness long carried in his blood. Priests pray through the night. His wife weeps at his bedside. But the light fades from his eyes before dawn. The boy king is gone, leaving Egypt once more in mourning. He dies without an heir. The throne passes to Ea, then to Horemheb. But none can erase the sorrow of so brief a reign. His tomb is sealed hastily, a modest resting place compared to the great pharaohs before him. Sand and time hide it for more than 3,000 years, until one day, in 1922, a man named Howard Carter lowers a candle into a narrow shaft in the Valley of the Kings. The flame flickers, revealing gold, ivory, and wonder beyond imagination. Carter whispers, "I see wonderful things." Tutankhamun, the forgotten boy king, returns to the light, the treasures of his tomb. The golden mask, the jeweled sarcophagus, the statues of gods and guardians speak of a love for beauty and faith in eternity. Though his life was short, his afterlife became eternal. His name, once buried under dust, now shines brighter than any king before him. And so, through the quiet strength of a boy and the mystery of a sealed tomb, Egypt found immortality once more. The gods smiled, the Nile flowed, and the story of the two lands continued, reborn from death as it always was. The sun rises over the desert, burning red upon the horizon. The Nile glitters like molten gold, and the sound of hammers echoes through the valley. A new age has come, an age of might, of monument, of eternal kingship. And at its heart stands one man, Ramses II, whom the world will call Ramses the Great. Born to the royal line of the warrior pharaoh Seti, Ramses was destined for greatness. From childhood, he learned the art of war, the voice of command, and the wisdom of the scribes. He rode horses before he could speak like a man, drew the bow before he could read. The gods seemed to favor him, strong of arm, proud of spirit, radiant of face. When Seti passed into the afterlife, Ramses took the throne at barely 25. But his heart burned not only with the fire of kingship, it burned with the dream of immortality. He swore to make Egypt greater than it had ever been. He declared, "My name shall endure as long as the sun rises and the Nile flows." Thus began one of the longest and most magnificent reigns in history. For more than 60 years, Ramses ruled Egypt, a god among men. He fought, he built, he loved, and he left behind a legacy carved in stone and sunlight. The warrior king Ramses was a fighter before all else. His chariots thundered across the sands toward Syria and Canaan, where the Hittites ruled strong. At Kadesh, his army met the Hittite might in one of the greatest battles ever fought in the ancient world. The sky was filled with dust and cries, the ground soaked with blood. Ramses rode at the head of his men, his red crown flashing beneath the sun. Trapped and outnumbered, he called upon Ammon for strength, O my father Ammon, is there any God like you? Behold, I am alone in the midst of many foes, and legend says that Ammon heard his call. Ramses fought with the fury of a storm. He cut through enemy ranks, rallying his men, turning defeat into triumph. Though the battle ended without victory for either side, Ramses returned to Egypt as a hero. In his temples, he ordered his scribes to carve the tale in eternal words, I stood alone, yet the gods stood with me. I am Ramses, beloved of Ammon, the builder of eternity, but his might was not only in war, it was in creation. Wherever one looks in Egypt, his mark still stands. He built more temples, statues, and cities than any other pharaoh before or after. He raised the city of Pyramids, house of Ramses, a capital of splendor with wide avenues and shining palaces. At Luxor and Karnak, he added massive halls lined with columns as tall as trees. At Abu Simbel, he carved for colossal statues of himself into the living rock, each one towering 66 feet high. Those statues still sit upon the Nile's edge, facing the sunrise, silent watchers of eternity. Their faces are calm, godlike, eternal. When the morning light falls upon them, it is as though Ramses himself still greets the sun. He also built temples for his beloved queen, Nefertari, the most beautiful of the beautiful. Her temple at Abu Simbel stands beside his, a symbol of love that transcends time. Inside, her images show her not as a mortal, but as a goddess equal to Hathor herself. Ramses wrote to her, my love for you is stronger than millions of soldiers. It endures beyond death, the pharaoh and his people. Ramses was not a distant god-king. He was a ruler of the people. He oversaw harvests, judged disputes, and ensured the temples had gold and grain. He brought peace after years of war, signing one of the world's first recorded peace treaties with the Hittites, a promise carved into stone. Trade flourished again, the Nile's ports filled with ships from Nubia, Punt and Byblos. Artists, craftsmen, and priests all found favor under his rule. And Egypt thrived. Under the blazing sun, the land shimmered with prosperity. The scent of lotus flowers drifted along the river. Children learned to write his name, merchants offered prayers to his statues, and even foreign kings called him brother. The eternal king, as the decades passed, Ramses grew old, but his fire never dimmed. His hair turned silver, his hands trembled, but his voice remained strong. He outlived his sons, his generals and the queens of his youth. At last, after 90 years of life and 66 years of reign, he joined the gods, when his body was laid to rest in the Valley of the Kings. Egypt wept. They said the Nile itself slowed to mourn him. His tomb was vast, his sarcophagus golden, and his name, Usermuta Ramses Meriamun, echoed through the halls of eternity. Even today, his mummy lies in Cairo, his face calm and proud, as though he still watches over his kingdom. 3,000 years have passed, yet his monuments still stand and his name is still spoken. Ramses the Great, builder of wonders, master of time, son of the sun. And so, under his reign, Egypt reached its greatest glory, the peak of power, art, and divine kingship. The desert wind still whispers his name across the dunes. I am Ramses, beloved of Ammon. My name shall never die. The sun that once burned eternal over Egypt begins to dim. The mighty statues of Ramses still gaze across the desert, but the voices that praise the gods grow faint. The fields still glimmer in the flood of the Nile, yet the temples are quiet. The age of divine kingship of eternal pharaohs is ending, the twilight of empire. After Ramses the Great, the throne passed to his sons, then their sons, each weaker than the last. Egypt's power stretched to thin, her wealth to scattered. Foreign traders and mercenaries walked freely through her cities, and the once unbreakable army grew restless. The priests of Ammon in Thebes gained strength, claiming power once reserved for the king himself. Even the gods seemed divided, temples of Ammon in the south, temples of Ra in the north. Egypt's unity began to crumble like sandstone beneath time's wind. The great monuments still stood, but their builders were gone. Gold once flowing from Nubia slowed to a trickle. The mines of Sinai fell silent, the trade routes to Byblos and Crete dwindled. Egypt, the heart of the ancient world, began to grow old. In the third intermediate period, Pharaohs no longer ruled all of Egypt. Instead, the land split. Thebes in the south ruled by priest kings, Tanis in the north ruled by warriors. Brother fought brother, temple rivaled temple. The divine throne that had once united the two lands now stood as a symbol of division. Still, the people clung to their gods. In the villages along the Nile, farmers offered grain to Osiris for a good harvest, women sang hymns to Isis for protection, and children learned to write the names of long-dead kings. The body of Egypt still lived, but its soul had begun to fade. Invasion and foreign rule then came the storm, from beyond the sands, from lands Egypt once called lesser. The Libyans swept in first, warriors of the west, fierce and proud, they claimed crowns, built cities and called themselves pharaohs, though they were not of Egyptian blood. Then came the Cushites, from Nubia, dark-skinned kings from the south who revered Egypt's gods and sought to restore her glory. For a time, under the 25th dynasty, Egypt's heart beat strong again. They built temples in the old style, honored Ammon, and revived the ancient spirit. But soon, new powers rose in the east, the Assyrians, masters of war. Their chariots thundered across the sands, burning cities, crushing armies. The temples of Thebes were plundered, and pharaohs fled before their wrath. Egypt bowed, not to her gods, but to foreign kings. When the Assyrians faded, the Persians came, vast and unstoppable. They treated Egypt as a province, its pharaohs as governors. The sacred tombs were robbed. The treasures of the gods melted down for coin. The old religion endured in whispers, in shadowed shrines hidden along the Nile's banks. The people prayed for deliverance, and deliverance came, but not as they expected. From across the Mediterranean came a new kind of conqueror, led not by gods, but by ambition. His name was Alexander the Great. The Greek pharaoh Alexander rode into Egypt in 330 BCE, greeted not as an invader, but as a liberator. He bowed before Ammon's oracle at Siwa, and the priests declared him the son of the god. For the first time in centuries, Egypt had a ruler who honored her traditions. He founded Alexandria, a shining city by the sea, a place of learning, beauty, and power. When Alexander died young, his general Ptolemy took Egypt as his own. Thus began the Ptolemaic dynasty, Greek rulers who wore Egyptian crowns, spoke foreign tongues, yet prayed to the old gods. For 300 years they ruled the two lands. They built temples in the style of the ancients, Edfu, Dendera, Philae, and filled them with hieroglyphs as though trying to preserve the soul of a dying world. But the Ptolemies were not divine like the pharaohs of old. They quarreled, poisoned, and betrayed one another. Their court glittered with gold but stank of corruption, and among them rose a queen whose beauty would echo through eternity, Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh Cleopatra, was no ordinary ruler. She spoke many tongues, studied philosophy and medicine, and ruled not from the sword but from intellect and charm. She sought to restore Egypt's strength in a world now ruled by Rome. To save her kingdom, she allied with Julius Caesar, bore him a son, and later with Mark Antony, one of Rome's greatest generals. For a moment, Egypt shone again, its fleet strong, its temples rich, its queen revered as the living Isis. But Rome's power was too great. After Caesar's death, Antony and Cleopatra stood against Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus. Their fleets met at the Battle of Actium, and there Egypt's last hope was lost. Antony fell by his own sword. Cleopatra, proud to the end, refused to be paraded as a trophy of Rome. She took her life in her palace, legend says, by the bite of an asp, the serpent of royalty. With her death in 30 BCE, the line of pharaohs, unbroken for 3,000 years, came to its end. Egypt became a province of Rome. The temples grew silent. The hieroglyphs faded, the gods forgotten. Only the Nile remained eternal, flowing as it always had, bearing the memory of a lost golden age. And though empires would come and go, Rome, Byzantium, Arabia, Britain, none would ever match the majesty of Egypt's ancient soul. Her pyramids, her statues, her sacred tombs still whisper to the wind. We were the first. We are eternal. The story of Egypt does not end with Cleopatra's last breath. For though the crowns were broken and the temples silenced, the spirit of Egypt never faded. Like the Nile, that flows endlessly through the desert, the soul of this ancient land endured through conquest. Through time, through memory, the land that would not die. When Rome took Egypt, it became the grain basket of the empire, its golden fields feeding Caesar's legions. The pyramids still watched over the sands, their peaks glowing red in the setting sun. Roman soldiers camped beneath them, staring in awe at the work of men they could never equal. They carved their own names beside hieroglyphs they could not read, never knowing they stood in the shadow of eternity. In time, Christianity came to Egypt, and the temples of the gods turned into churches. The old gods fell silent, Ammon, Isis, Osiris, their statues broken or hidden away. Yet their stories lived on in whispers, in symbols, in the hearts of the people. Even the new faith could not erase the memory of the lotus and the ankh, the scarab and the falcon. Egypt remembered. Then came the Arab conquest, and the call to prayer echoed across the Nile for the first time. The language changed, the rulers changed, but the river still flowed and the desert still guarded its secrets. Cairo rose, Al-Qahira, the victorious, a city of light and knowledge. Mosques with grand domes replaced temples, yet the same sun gilded their walls. The same wind whispered through their streets. The Egyptians, children of the Nile, carried forward the same patience, the same pride, the same ancient soul, the rediscovery of a lost world for centuries. Egypt's past slept beneath the sand. Her gods forgotten, her script unreadable, her stories buried. Travelers from far lands came and marveled at her ruins, the towering pyramids, the silent sphinx, the painted tombs deep in the Valley of the Kings. But they did not understand her. To them, these were merely wonders, not memories. Then, in 1799, a soldier of Napoleon's army found a black stone near Rosetta, a stone that would awaken the past. It bore 3 scripts, Greek, Demotic, and the sacred hieroglyphs. When the scholar Jean-François Champollion unlocked its secret, Egypt spoke again after 2,000 years of silence. The names of the pharaohs, Ramses, Thutmose, Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, returned to the world. The walls of tombs and temples could finally tell their stories once more, and so began the age of Egyptology, an age of wonder and rediscovery. Explorers crossed the desert to uncover hidden tombs, scholars brushed away centuries of dust, and the world fell in love with Egypt all over again. In 1922, when Howard Carter broke through the sealed door of Tutankhamun's tomb, the ancient world came roaring back to life. Gold, art, mystery, all preserved as if time itself had bowed before Egypt's will to endure. The whole world gasped as the boy king's golden mask was lifted into the light. It was as though the eyes of ancient Egypt had opened once more, calm, timeless, knowing. The eternal spirit even now, thousands of years later. Egypt's presence still shapes the world. Her temples teach us about faith, her art about beauty, her writings about the human soul. The modern world owes its heartbeat to the wisdom of the Nile. Mathematics, architecture, astronomy, medicine, all were born here in the shadow of the pyramids. Walk along the riverbanks today, and you still feel it, that hum beneath the surface, that whisper in the air. The same sun that shone upon Ramses and Cleopatra still warms the fields. The same stars that guided the builders of the pyramids still burn above Cairo's night sky. The past is not gone. It lives. It breathes. It waits. Every stone in Luxor, every carving in Karnak, every tomb in the Valley of the Kings carries a message that has outlasted empires. Time is fleeting, stone endures, memory is divine, and so, the legacy of Egypt is not one of death, but of rebirth. It is the story of a civilization that rose from the river and built eternity. From sand, it is the tale of a people who dreamed of the afterlife and, through their works, achieved it. The Nile flows, the wind sings through broken columns, and the golden light of Ra still kisses the horizon. The pharaohs sleep, yet their voices whisper through time. We built not for years, but for forever. And as long as the sun rises over the desert and sets beyond the dunes, as long as the pyramids stand and the river flows, Egypt shall never truly die.